a tutor later. But this is pretty informal, so you can stop me at any time and ask any questions you have. So to use these computers, hopefully you all have computer science accounts. Your normal Odin account won't work with these computers. And you just have to be in any computer science course to get one, and someone at the front desk here will get you an account, or next door at the CAT. So some of the topics I'm going to go over, just some basics of how to navigate the directory structure in Linux, and like manipulating files, copying files, and so on. And then just general rules like how to get help on commands, and also how to get help on like standard C library functions, because that'll be something you'll be doing a lot in your classes. And some stuff about the secure shell, which is a standard way to connect remotely to the computers here. And just a few fun things I threw in after that. So yeah, Linux is very similar. If you use, say, DOS or something, there's a current working directory at all times that represents like basically where you're at in the file system. And it typically starts out in like tilde, which is just an abbreviation for your home directory, which is /home/your username. And as opposed to like Windows, the root starts out at just a / for the root of the whole directory structure. And basic command cd is change directory. So that can be either a relative path or an absolute path. And one cool thing is tab completion. So for example, I can demonstrate here. If I'm in a terminal and and you might want to, I don't know if you've all used the terminal in Ubuntu, for example, but if you just go to like applications, then accessories, there's the terminal there. So yeah, for example, if I wanted to like go to my downloads or whatever, I could just start typing and then hit tab, and it'll automatically complete that directory if it exists. So that's a useful feature. And pwd will just print the directory you're currently in, and usually your prompt will list that anyway. And ls is for listing the contents of a directory, and commands have options where you can put like dash, then typically a letter or string of any sort after a command to get a variation on that command. So ls/a lists hidden files in addition to normal files, and ls/l lists all the details of the files, like who created the file, when it was last modified, things like that. So does anyone have any questions so far about those commands? Okay.
ls-l only does the non-hidden files, right?
Yeah, ls-, you'd have to do L and A. You'd have to do ls-la. Yeah. Yeah, you could do. Yeah, so yeah, ls-l will, this is zoomed in a bit too much. Yeah, so yeah, ls-l will just display the normal files that aren't hidden, and then you could do, -l-a. Why is that not working?
Yeah, it does. It did on mine.
Oh yeah, it should work. I don't know. Yeah, anyway, I probably typed something dumb, but anyway, that should. Yeah, you have to do both commands. So moving on. So the dot just refers to the current directory you're in, and dot refers to the parent directory up one level. And you can refer to like all the files in a directory by using the star. So for example, if I wanted to copy all the photos in some directory that started with 3D, then I could do cp 3d star.jpg, and then it would just copy all the files that started with 3D. Okay, so now we'll get into file manipulation. Yeah, CP is for copying a file, and it's a really flexible command. So, yeah, for example, I could like do CP, let me back out of here. mkdir is for making a directory. So I could like make a directory called copy of downloads. And then, so the basic usage of the command is you can do like CP some file name. So I could do CP mm.cfg, and then you give a destination, and the destination can either be like a directory or a file. And if the destination is a file, it will overwrite that file or create a new file. And if it's a directory, then it'll give it the same name, but put it in that directory. So if I like copy this to that new directory I made, copy of downloads, I just put the directory name. So now if I go in there, it just gave it the same name, but put it in that directory. Or I could like copy this file, and I could give it a new name, and the dot refers to the current directory. I could call it like whatever, m2.cfg. And then, yeah, I made a new file called m2.cfg. So it's a very flexible command. And another important feature of that command is if you do the -r option, that means to copy recursively. So it just copies everything in that directory and all directories inside that directory and so on. So say I wanted to copy everything in that directory I just created. I could do cp/r and then say into a new directory. And now if I go to that new directory, it copied all the contents of that directory into the new directory.
Can you turn the lights on a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Did you make the new directory beforehand, or was that already?
No, I didn't make it. You don't have to make it in that case. Yeah, it depends on how you're using CP. I think sometimes you have to create the directory and sometimes you don't. Yeah, but yeah, in that case, if the directory doesn't exist, it'll just make it, because when you have the -r command, it knows that you're copying a directory. So yeah, if the destination is a directory, it'll make it.
Or can you leave out the -r and then leave the slash at the end, and that tells it that it's a directory?
Yeah, you could do that. If the directory already exists, then yeah. So what's an example? Saying leave out the /r.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could do like, I think it'll say it's not copying the directories. So if I say cp,
But if you put the slash after, to new, you can just say slash,
yeah, so it's going to say omitting directory because you didn't use the -r command. So yeah, by default, I think it doesn't copy any directories.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, yeah, mkdir, making a new directory. And then rm is you want to be really careful with, because it doesn't prompt you or anything. It'll just delete whatever files you list. And again, the -r command for rm will delete an entire directory and everything inside of it. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Any questions about file manipulation? Okay, I guess I'll move on. Yeah, so an important topic is like, what resources do you use if you have some question about a command and you just don't know how to get any further? Man is just a command you're going to use all the time. It opens the manual page for a program, And it also opens programmer manual pages for like functions in C libraries and things like that. So yeah, so you can just do, so for example, I could do, a man ls. And at first, the amount of information it gives you can be sort of overwhelming because there's just everything about that command. But just the more you use it, the more you'll get used to the format of it, and you'll get better at figuring out how to get info from that. And then apropos is just like searching the man pages for a keyword, because the man function has to be the exact same. You have to know the exact name of the command you're talking about, but apropos you don't. And then a lot of the times for command line programs, you can use like a dash question mark or 2 dashes and help. That's pretty common for getting help for various commands. Yeah, and just keep in mind, everything's case sensitive, unlike Windows where it's, only passwords are case sensitive, I guess, in Windows. Yeah. So, any questions about that stuff? Okay. Yeah, so another important topic is like using secure shell to get into the computers here. And if you have like a Windows machine at home and you just don't have access to a Linux machine at home and you don't want to set it up, like PuTTY is a common client for Windows. And I don't use Mac, I can't remember, but I think the cat webpage mentions some clients you can use for Mac. It probably has SSH on Mac, I thought, but so for example, if you want to connect here, when you got your account, they probably gave you this info on a sheet of paper. But yeah, so for example, my laptop's just hooked up to the wireless here, so I'm not on like one of these computers. But if you just do SSH, then like your username at linuxlab.cs.pdx.edu, and I can't type, then it'll connect you to just any available computer here. And yeah, and then you can just work on that computer as if you were in the Linux lab here. So that's really useful. If you need to do work at home and you really need a Linux environment, then SSH is going to be key. And another important tool is chmod. That's like for modifying the permissions of files. So you might be trying to like run some file that you downloaded, for example. Like typically the permissions will be set wrong right after you download it, and they'll be like, it just won't let me execute this file. And the reason is probably that you need to give yourself permission to do so. So the basic syntax for chmod is you do like UG or O. U stands for the user that created the file. G stands for the group the file's in, and O stands for others, anyone else. And then you do plus or minus to either add or remove permissions. And then RWX stands for like read, write, or execute. And there's also like D for directories, or yeah. So so basically, say I had some file. Yeah, so say I wanted to like give other people access to my like pictures folder or something. Right now, this is saying that I have all sorts of access to pictures, and people in the them group or whatever have no access, and everyone else has no access also. So I could do like chmod go plus r. And what this is saying is it's saying the group the file's in and everyone else gets read access to the file or directory. And I'll say pictures. And now if I do an ls/l, you can see that there are these R's here now because the other two groups got read access to that folder. So that's a really important command, and we'll probably use that a lot. So any questions about this slide? And feel free to interrupt me in the middle. It's pretty informal. So here are just some other important commands. Password is just for like changing your current password. PS displays all the processes that are currently running in the shell you opened. And if you do like -u, then a username, then it'll display all the processes that were started by that user. And then finger and then a username like displays like a bunch of information about a user on the network. And then for printing, LPQ is for like checking the print queue. So for example, right now you guys could see, the printer right out here, which you might use if you come to the Linux lab a lot, is FabC 8802BW1. That's like the name for it that'll work in this room. So you can just do, LPQ-P from the printer name, and that'll tell you like what's in the print queue. And then LPR-P, and then the printer and then a file name will print that file to a printer. And you could also do that just like in Ubuntu. If you're using a graphical program in GNOME, then you could just print it there too. And there's a list of printers. And then grep is used for like searching the contents of a file line by line. So it's really useful if you are like programming, you have a programming project, and you want to find out like where did I use this function or something, then you can use grep to like find all the lines in that file where that text appeared. And it's a really powerful tool. It's kind of like doing Control F in some graphical program, but it's much more powerful. So yeah, you can check out the manual of that. Any questions about this stuff?
Well, RN will also tell you the line number that it finds.
Yeah.
files on.
Yeah. True. Yes, you can get the.
FYI.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of options. You can like man that and you'll figure it out. Yeah. And just like a few fun things I thought I'd mention. I'm not like a huge like guru on Linux, but some of the basic stuff you might want to do is like change your prompt in your shell you might want to do. And eventually if you're like installing programs, you'll probably have to like add something to your path variable. Your path variable is basically any executable that's in one of those directories is available whenever you're using your command prompt. So that's really important. And alias is for like making a custom command. And what you can do is you can edit your bashrc file. So it's a hidden file. So you do like, if you do an ls-a, it'll show up. And then just for visibility, I'll just like open it in some random program. Oh, I'll do it on my laptop. Let me open up another terminal here. So bashrc files have a bunch of stuff you're not going to care about, but like for example, if you wanted to make a custom prompt, like personally, I prefer just having a really simple prompt. I don't want like a bunch of extra information there, because if I'm doing a lot of stuff, I find it to be like really annoying. So I made my prompt just have like the current working directory and then just a angle bracket, and I just made it red just because I wanted a different color. So you could like copy this command into your .bashrc file if you wanted to make a custom prompt that looks like that. And this looks all crazy. I just looked up this syntax. It's just for making it like this /e is just like for making it colored, and /w just means the current working directory. So basically, I just have the /w, then an angle bracket, and that means display the current working directory at all times, followed by the angle bracket. Yeah?
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, go for it.
If we wanted to change that for our own kind of custom thing, that's the variable we would edit.
Yeah, you'd edit this text file. This is just in,
.bashrc.
yeah, this is just in your home directory, or you might have to create a new file. I think these systems by default don't have a .bashrc. So you just create a new file called .bashrc in your home directory, and then you can add any commands you want to it. And yeah, you just like use this command, export PS1, and then set it equal to whatever you want. And this is just what I use to make it look pretty, but you can do whatever you want. Yeah, in the future, you're probably going to have to change your path variable. And to do that, you just add this line, export path, and I'm setting it equal to $path, then colon, whatever I wanted to add to it, because that way it appends some information onto the path variable. It's like set the path variable equal to itself, then a colon, and then another path you want to add to it. So yeah, if you ever install software in Linux, you're probably going to have to edit that. And yeah, you might want to add aliases in your bashrc file also. And that's basically just defining a custom command. So I'm saying like PDX Linux will now be a new command that executes, that SSHs into the Linux labs at PSU here. So
Your
yeah.
command prompt, you would just have to type PDX Linux and it would.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. If you put that in your bashrc, then now the new command will just be PDX Linux, yeah. So that's pretty slick. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions? Anything you want to go over?
Yeah, so I'm in like CS 161, and all I
Yeah.
know about Linux is that it's an operating system.
That's fine.
So
Yeah.
can you explain like some basics of like why we'd want to use Linux or anything like that?
Yeah, so for me, I think it's important if you get into computer science a lot because it's just a lot easier to study how operating systems work. It's like more transparent than Windows.
You have more control.
Yeah, you can customize your environment a lot better. I mean, I'm not like a huge like Linux expert. I use it as a programming environment, but probably some other people here could like give you a more in-depth answer. But I mean, also there's just a lot of open source software for it, and if you take more advanced courses here, I mean, you'll need to use Linux because standard compilers. You'll need a Linux environment to use the standard C libraries and standard compilers. There's a
Encourage it.
So some
Yeah.
programming languages only use Linux.
well, usually you can compile them in other operating systems, but like the class, for example, will require that it compiles on, you know, the Linux labs here because you need one standard programming environment, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Like one of them is like a 2 gigabyte IDE, and the other one is just like a small little like 50 kilobyte binary package.
Yeah,
As opposed to downloading that huge.
yeah, you don't have to download this huge thing, and it's just like you understand programming a lot better if you don't have all the magic of like an IDE running around. Because yeah, if you use like Visual Studio all the time, then you'd think like, oh, what's going on in the background? You know, all these things are happening under the sheets. But if you just use like a command line compiler like GCC, then you really see like it's not that complicated. All Visual Studio is really doing is like giving GCC a list of files, and then it's compiling them. And you can learn more about like the processes that go on in compiling. Like there's pre-processing, then like linking. I mean, then there's compiling. Then there's, I can't think right now. I'm like missing a step. Then there's linking. Yeah, so I think it's just like a lot easier to really understand what's going on. Also, like how memory's managed in Linux is much more transparent. You can understand that. So
So
yeah.
you can step through the program and everything, debug.
Yeah, you can do debugging and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, there's like a command line debugger. I think they're giving talks about those too. Like GDB is a standard. Yeah, I use like GDB a lot. It's a standard command line debugger. I mean, you can get graphical front ends for it too if you want, but yeah, it's a really powerful debugger.
Can you kind of cheat with the whole compiler thing by using an IDE that runs the same compiler? Doesn't Dev C++ use?
Yeah, I mean, they have IDEs that'll use the same compiler. I mean, you can get IDEs in Linux for sure. It's not like you have to use, but I think the biggest thing is it's good to do things for a while at least on the command prompts, because IDEs often just do a lot of things automatically. And it's sort of, you'll find that to be annoying when you really get into programming, that the IDEs do things automatically. And you'll understand it better if you don't use an IDE for a while at least. I mean, when you get a job or whatever, if you like get a job developing, you might end up using an IDE there. You probably will, because you need some features of that. But I think it's really important to be able to do it without an IDE.
Well, a lot of jobs want you to be familiar with Linux and stuff too.
Yeah, definitely.
So. And they'll want you to start using it in like 163 and
Yeah.
201 and stuff, so it's just kind of good to get familiar with it now.
Oh yeah, another important thing about Linux, it's just one of the biggest like web server platforms. Like LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP is one of the like biggest platforms used for web servers. So like I've worked a lot with LAMP platforms, and that's really huge. And like, yeah, just Apache in general, Linux servers for Java too. I mean, Linux is probably this, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I think it's the biggest single platform for web servers. So, yeah. Anyway, so, yeah, if you don't have a CS account, you can talk to someone at the front desk here or next door and get one of those. Yeah. Right. Any other questions? Okay. Guess that's it for today then. You can stay here and try things out if you want.